So moving on to stage three is from about 3 to 6 years of age, and it's known as the phallic stage. So the child now focuses his or her libido onto the genitalia. Um, and this is more so abstract because we say focuses his or her libido onto the genitalia. So this can sort of be confusing with one of the later stages, the genital stage that we'll go over in a couple of minutes. But this is more abstract, and it really more so has to do with gender roles and how they're relating to their parents. So the child recognizes the difference between both sexes. So they're becoming aware of the fact that males and females are biologically different. And they begin to identify with the same sex parent. So Freud believed that a young boy will start to identify with his father, probably start to take on his ideals and attitudes. And this process is called identification. And that is how the child resolves his Oedipal complex, or if she is a female child, her Electra complex, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. I'm sure some of you even read Oedipus Rex. So to more closely bond with the parent of the opposite sex, the child will adopt the attitudes and values of the same sex parent. So the Oedipal complex, as I'm sure you guys know, is, a son wants to remove the father from the picture to completely dominate the mother figure. So Freud believed that this was like a fundamental struggle in this period, and the way that the child overcame this struggle was to identify with the same sex parent and adopt the attitudes and values of that same sex parent. So this is how Freud believed that the superego developed. So like we mentioned before, the ego is how you project yourself to others, and the superego is basically the ideals and the values that you strive to be. So the superego is sort of keeping your id in check. And Freud believed that the superego was subjective. So it was developed by example. So he believed that, same-sex parents, and when I say same-sex parent, I don't mean same-sex couples. I mean same-sex meaning a boy would relate to his father and a girl would relate to her mother. So that's how he believed that these children develop their superego. Okay, so once they resolve that and they leave that stage, stage 4 is latency, and this is about 6 years to puberty. So, about 12 to 14-ish. So Freud believed that during this period, a child's sexual energy completely disappears. It goes completely dormant. It is nowhere to be found anymore. So babies and toddlers, sexual energy. A 9-year-old, no sexual energy. The child is preoccupied with learning, making social connections, and acquiring new skills. So he believes that this newfound social environment, we're meeting new people, we're learning new things, we're learning in school, we're learning skills outside of school. He believed that the sexual energy just went dormant. And he also believed that play in this stage becomes largely confined to those of the same sex. Which, I mean, I guess you could see some evidence for that. I mean, when you see children in, middle to late elementary school, boys will flock with boys, girls will flock with girls. So I guess he just saw that and made it part of his theory. Yeah, so someone brought up stage 3 theory. What about single parent homes? Who does the child identify with? Which is super true. I'm sure that there are some pretty cool criticisms online if you look at that. And I'm sure that's something that Freud had addressed in his lifetime. He probably chalked it up to some sort of fixation resulting from that stage, or some sort of perversion resulting from that stage. That's usually what happens when something goes wrong or when something doesn't fit into these sorts of theories. They're pretty much just like, oh, fixation, oh, perversion. But that's a really interesting question, and I think that'll probably be pretty interesting to look up as well. So, I mean, and you can see kind of just in the 21st century how you can easily poke holes in some of these theories. So they're not really meant to be taken seriously at this point, but it's important to learn about them in a historical context because they did give rise to some other theories that we do use today. So it's not completely useless, and that's why they still test your knowledge of it. So stage 5 is the genital stage, and that is from puberty to adulthood. So the teenager's sexual energy is most obviously focused on the genitals. And like I was making the distinction before, this is more of like physical sexual energy being focused on the genitals, whereas the phallic stage was more so gender roles and more of an abstract representation of it. So in this stage, young humans will experiment sexually and eventually settle down with an opposite sex partner in their 20s, which again, this is, Freud's thinking from the 20th century. Obviously, he did not have a 21st century view of gender and sexuality. So these theories tend to seem a little bit outdated when we look at them. In this stage, fixations rooted in other stages become apparent. So this is the stage where all of these other fixations that we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes become apparent, and this is where they become a problem. So oral, anal, and phallic fixations may appear in sexual habits. And he said any disruptions in this stage or these past stages could result in sexual perversions. So he believed that these sexual perversions were evident of fixations that were a result from any of these 5 stages. Yeah, so sexual perversions are referring to, behaviors out of the norm. So sexual attractions, like extra human sexual attractions. I don't want to go too in depth to it. You can definitely look it up. Maybe things that we would refer to today as kinks, he would refer to as sexual perversions. But then also things that we still consider disordered sexually, like pedophilia, stuff like that. But I'm sure if you were to ask Freud, he would probably consider other like more mainstream ideas, sexual perversions, like sexualities that aren't heterosexual. I'm sure he would have considered perversions as well. But yeah, that's the gist of it.